Hello and welcome to this video where I'm going to be talking about all the things that I've been able to do thanks to learning other languages. I'm mainly going to be talking about learning Spanish and how learning Spanish opened up a whole new world of people, of places and opportunities and experience for me, but also how learning Spanish acted as a springboard for me to then go on and learn other languages such as Portuguese, French and German. I'm going to do the whole video in English because I want everyone to be able to watch this even if you don't speak another language or you don't speak any Spanish. They say that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with just one step, so I'm hoping that maybe this video will inspire some people to take that first step, to download Duolingo or to buy a book about a foreign language and to make that first step on this journey to learning another language and opening up and unlocking a whole part of the world that's waiting for you to discover it and to explore it. So I'm going to sort of tell you how I went from being this very blonde young English boy that only spoke English to then being still quite blonde English man that speaks Spanish fluently and a few other languages. I'm going to explain how my world went from looking like this to this sort of world map where there's lots of different countries, lots of different cultures, cinema, film, music, food, lots of different culture to experience and people to communicate with, which for me is what language learning is all about. It's about connecting with people and being able to communicate with people. So as mentioned, when I was really young, I didn't speak any Spanish. I'd been to Spain a few times on family holidays, but I hadn't really started learning the language. So my world very much still looked like this, just the blue areas. It was only really in 2006 that my journey with Spanish started, because that's when I started learning Spanish in secondary school. I had a great teacher, I really loved Spanish, I couldn't get enough, I loved being able to say things in Spanish. In 2007 I started learning French at school alongside Spanish. But in the end I stuck with the Spanish. I did Spanish at GCSE, I dropped French. This is a picture of me during my GCSE years. And then I went on to do the A-level in Spanish. And around that sort of time as well, I was just so into Spanish. I was listening to loads of Spanish music. I was really getting into it, but it was really when I was on a family holiday, I met a large group of girls from Colombia around my age. And it was just awesome to be able to speak to them. And I met a load of Irish lads and British people, and you know, they couldn't speak to these girls and I could, and I was able, I wasn't fluent, but I was able to get the message across, I was able to communicate, I was able to ask them things about their country and their lives, and I was able to share things about my life. So that for me was really the moment where I thought, wow, speaking another language is really like a superpower. And from there my motivation just skyrocketed. It was also thanks to meeting these people that I was introduced to music from South America, reggaeton. And after that holiday I kept chatting to loads of them, specifically one person I kept chatting to on Skype. I was able to really learn Spanish from a native speaker. And actually I found that on my Twitter, this was I think the first tweet that I sent, not quoting Spanish but writing Spanish myself, and that was in 2011. So I was really into the Spanish, I was tweeting in Spanish, I was listening to Spanish music, I was listening to a radio station in Spanish, I was speaking to people on Skype in Spanish. I was super motivated, and I really reaped the benefits from that motivation because I was able to learn at a quicker pace than I would have had I just done the schoolwork. And I really got into this group called Calle 13, and I just fell in love with this group. I just loved their music, I loved everything they were about. So I was listening to them all the time, I was translating their lyrics and learning their songs, and I was reading this book like it was the Bible, because the things that can seem boring about learning a language when you're in class and you're learning grammar, and you don't really know why you're learning the grammar, like why do you have to memorize all these different endings? For me at this stage I was really seeing what it was about, because I'd learn a verb, I'd learn its conjugations, and then I'd have a Skype video call and I'd be able to use that verb and use those conjugations to say something that I couldn't say before. So it was really allowing me to express myself. Motivation wise, I think it's a lot easier to be motivated if you've got a real solid tangible reason to do the work, and I did, because I was able to speak to people and understand songs and watch movies and understand movies and talk about things with people that didn't speak English. So for me, verb conjugation was really important. And then in 2012, unfortunately my classmates, they didn't want to go to Spain, so my school didn't organise a trip. I was really keen on the idea, and thankfully my teacher knew another teacher at another school and they had someone drop out of their trip. So I was able to go to Madrid on the school trip with a completely different school. I didn't know anyone, but thankfully I wasn't too shy by this age. And we went to the football stadium in Madrid, we went to El Retiro, a big awesome park in Madrid where you can take a rowing boat around the lake. We went to a restaurant, I was able to strike up conversation with the waiter and ask him for a picture in Spanish. We went to a place called Segovia, and I learned a bit about the history of Spain. And it was also around this time that I was reading about the life of Che Guevara, and I was super into finding out more about his life, and my Twitter feed was just full of Spanish, you know, I was super into it. Well, I still am. So in 2013 I finished my A-levels and I started studying Spanish and Sociology at Aston University. You learn lots of different things in a language degree about art, politics, history, culture, and at Aston that was all taught in Spanish, which was awesome for me. And I was also able, in the first year, for free, to pick up an extra module in another language, so I decided to do Brazilian Portuguese. And in 2014, by this stage, it came to the summer and I was super keen to get to Spain. Actually, that group I was talking about, Calle 13, they were going to be at a festival in the south of Spain. And I'd heard lots about Andalusia, the southern region of Spain. I really wanted to visit. So I bought my ticket, I packed up my backpack, got on a plane and I flew to Malaga. I didn't know anyone, I didn't have a tent, I didn't really have a plan, I just knew that I was going to fly to Andalusia, travel around a bit, and then I was going to see my favourite group at this festival. So the first place I stayed was a hostel in Malaga, and actually there I got chatting to someone and they said they were going to this festival as well, so immediately, thanks to speaking the language, I was able to, you know, make a friend. Maybe they'd have a tent I could stay in at the festival, which in the end they did, thankfully. If not, I was just going to sleep on the beach. So this is me in Malaga, and then I went to Granada. I actually didn't plan to go to Granada, but speaking to people, they were like, oh dude, you've got to go to Granada, it's a really awesome place. So I visited Granada, and actually I ended up living there after this, so that was a really important moment for me. I went to Sevilla, I stayed in a backpackers hostel in Triana, so La Plaza de España, which you might recognise from a Star Wars movie. And then I went to Cádiz, which is where I saw Calle 13, my favourite group. When I first got there, the guy that had given me his number hadn't responded, I don't think he'd arrived, so I just went to the beach and I met this couple of guys in the picture on the left and spent a few hours with them, just chatting with them and finding out about Murcia, the part of Spain where they were from. And then after a few hours, the guy that I spoke to in Malaga arrived, which is this guy here, and he brought his friends with him, and I was able to, you know, hang out with those people for the next 2 or 3 days. Thankfully they had space in their tent for me, and actually this guy, Pedro, is one of my best friends to this day. So speaking Spanish, you know, being able to travel, being able to go to Spain without a plan and just make friends and get by and ask for directions, and it was just so liberating and so important. I think the experience would have been so different had I arrived as someone that just speaks English. And then in 2015 I travelled again during the summer. I went to Barcelona, I went back to Malaga, I went back to Granada, and because I was planning to then move to Granada, I was able to organise a house for myself and buy a bike, so that in September when I'd go over to study in Granada I had everything sorted. And this brings me on to 2015, which is really the key year. This is the year where I became completely fluent in Spanish. And that's because I moved to Granada to do an Erasmus Plus year. Now Erasmus is unfortunately ending for UK students, but it's something that within the EU is kind of an agreement where universities can send their students to another country and accept students from another country, so that all European students at university have the opportunity to live in another country and potentially learn and speak another language. So I studied at the University of Granada, and I lived with this guy Checo. He's from Cordoba, so we just spoke Spanish the whole time, which was fantastic for me, learning Spanish. And despite doing essays and learning lots of academic stuff at uni, you know, living with someone that speaks Spanish, I learned lots of things that I didn't know, because they don't really come up at university, like what's the name for a chopping board, what's the name for this sort of saucepan, you know. So I learned lots and lots of Spanish. Every day was a really awesome experience, because every day you're learning stuff, you're just surrounded by Spanish, whether you're seeing it, hearing it, you're speaking it. It's just such an awesome experience to live in the country. And if you are learning a foreign language, it could be something you have as a bit of a goal, that when you get to the stage where you can express yourself, you can get by, to go and live in a country that speaks the language that you're learning, your target language. Because when you get to the stage where you can say, ¿Cómo se llama esto? What's the name for this? Or ¿Cómo digo no sé qué? Or ¿Cómo se dice such and such? Like, how do you say this? When you get to that stage, you don't really need anything else. If you're in the country and you can describe things, if you don't know the exact word, you can ask for words, you can ask people to repeat things, then you can just learn indefinitely from that stage onwards. So I was able to get involved in animal rights activism, I was able to go and volunteer at an animal sanctuary, and I also adopted a stray dog, and it was so essential that I spoke Spanish to organise that, to take him to the vets, to get him his pet passport, to get him checked up, to get him his vaccinations and stuff like that. It was essential that I spoke Spanish because the vet didn't speak English. I had a beautiful view every day of the Alhambra Palace, a really historical site. Actually, it's the #1 sort of tourist destination in Spain. And most importantly, I guess sort of tied with adopting Mali, I made a lot of friends of all ages from different parts of Spain, and people who are my friends to this day, people that I've gone to visit countless times in Spain. Some of them have come to visit me in England. The picture where my hood is up, that's obviously in England because it was raining. So that was one of the, the best things about living in Spain and just speaking Spanish for a whole year, meeting incredible people, going to incredible places, having awesome experiences, and getting to the stage where I was fluent in the language. And then in 2016 I went skiing. Actually, Granada is a great place if you like skiing because you're about 50 minutes to the ski resort and about an hour and 20 minutes to the beach. So at certain times in the year you could literally go to the beach in the morning, go skiing in the afternoon. It's really awesome. It's got such a varying climate because of the altitude. And I also bought a car, which again is something that's, speaking the language is really important if you're planning to buy a car in another country. And I bought a car because I needed to get myself back to the UK with my dog, Marley, and also with a friend, with a friend's girlfriend and her dog, and also a rabbit that I adopted while I was living in Spain. So as part of that, we did a bit of a road trip. We went to Jaén, which was another part of Spain. We went to an awesome place called Cazorla, beautiful place in nature. Then we went up to the north of Spain to San Sebastián, and then eventually up through France. We also swung by Amsterdam and Belgium because we did it all a bit more quickly than we expected, and then we got back to the UK. So my world no longer looked like this map. I wasn't just confined to these blue areas where mainly the language that is spoken by people in those areas is English. Now English, I'm not saying English is a useless language. It is a really widely spoken language if you include in the number of speakers the people that speak it as a second language, which is over 1 billion people. But in terms of native speakers, it's only 379 million across the whole world. So I'd added into my sort of world map these areas in red, so Spain and also most of Central and South America, and added 483 million native speakers. So there's more native speakers of Spanish than there are English speakers. It's actually the second widest spoken language in the world, so it does open up a lot of opportunities for you. Just a quick reminder, if you enjoyed this video, if you found it useful, please do hit that like button below. It really means a lot to me to know that people find these videos useful. And if you don't want to miss out on any of the future videos that I'll be posting, please do hit that subscribe button as well. And then in 2017 I graduated from uni. I finished my degree, finished my Spanish and Sociology degree, and in that same year I actually met my wife, who happens to be Colombian, so she's also a Spanish speaker. And then in that same year I went back to Malaga and saw Pedro, that's the guy who I went to the festival with, and popped back to Granada and saw some friends there as well. And then at the end of 2017 I started doing a sociology master's degree at the University of Warwick. And though I wasn't studying Spanish, there was actually a Spanish guy on the course, so again, being able to chat to him in Spanish was another perk. And then in 2018 I moved to London, and actually, funnily enough, speaking Spanish played a big part in this as well, because I got a job working for a couple of Spanish speakers. And that same year I got married, and then we went for our honeymoon. We spent a month travelling around Colombia, which is where my wife's from. We first went to Medellin, which is where she was born, and I was able to meet her family and properly get to know them because I spoke the language that they speak, and they didn't speak any English, so that would have been a very different experience if I didn't speak Spanish. So we spent quite a lot of time going around to different places with their cousins that were about the same age as us, and for example we went to the cinema with them and saw a film, which probably would have been quite boring for me if I didn't speak Spanish, or perhaps quite confusing. And from Medellin we then took a flight to the Caribbean, to a beautiful place called San Andres, which is an island in the Caribbean, but it's actually part of Colombia and they speak Spanish there. And that was one of the just most awesome places I've ever been to. And we did some ecotourism, we rented a bike and were able to go around the island. We saw some like caiman, kind of small crocodiles, like a diving experience, and saw the fish and stuff, and it was a really, really good time. And again, that experience was so much more enriched because I spoke the language. I was able to speak to the locals there. I was able to rent the motorbike a lot more easily than if I was speaking to someone that didn't speak much English and I could only speak English. So it was a really, really good trip. And then when we were back in the mainland, we went to a really beautiful place called Guatapé, and again there no one spoke English at all. And also we hired a car, which again it was a lot easier because I was able to go to the car rental place and speak to the people in Spanish. We drove to El Eje Cafetero, the place where most of Colombia's coffee is grown. And actually on the way there was a routine police stop. So we were stopped and they searched the car for drugs and stuff. The police officers, I don't think they spoke any English. And that would probably have been a very different experience if I wasn't able to understand what they were saying. It probably would have been quite frightening. But in the end it was fine because I was able to answer their questions, which were all in Spanish. And we were on our way. First we went to these natural hot springs, and then we had a tour of a coffee plantation, and again that was all in Spanish. And we even got to dress up in the clothing that they wear on the coffee plantations. And we visited this really cool place called Cocora Valley, El Valle de Cocora, where there are these like 100-foot or 200-foot palm trees. And then in 2019, we took a holiday to Marbella, and again it was really good that we speak Spanish. Marbella is in the south of Spain, because we were able to hire a car, a process that's made a lot easier if you speak the language. And we went to Granada, and my wife Val was able to meet some of my friends. And we also went to Tarifa, which was a place I'd never been to and I'd heard a lot about, which is almost like the southernmost point of Spain, where they do a lot of windsurfing. There's beautiful beaches. And it's also, from there you can actually see across the water to Africa. So it's a really interesting place. And we also went to what was in the past considered the most dangerous walkway on earth, El Caminito del Rey, and we did a guided tour of that as well, which was really interesting. In part 2 I talk about how I learned French to an upper intermediate level in just 12 weeks, how I got started with German, how I continue with my Portuguese, and I also share some tips and tricks and some strategies and some different platforms that I use for learning my target languages. Before you go, I'm just going to quickly explain how to make the most of using Spanish with James. If you head over to the main channel, you'll find on the landing page that there are lots of different sections. There's a section for beginner Spanish with all of the beginners level videos, there's one for intermediate Spanish, advanced Spanish, and there's one for poetry as well. So it's all nicely organised so that you can find the videos that are right for you at where you're at on your Spanish journey. And again, if you haven't already done so, it'd mean a lot if you just very gently click that subscribe button. And that brings us to the end of the video. Muchísimas gracias por ver este video y espero que te vaya muy bien con el español.